The envelope arrived on a Monday morning, thick and heavy, the kind of paper that feels like it's meant to last longer than the news cycle. Jasmine Crockett found it on her desk, the gold-embossed seal of the former president pressed into the flap, and for a moment, she just stared at it. The office was quiet, sunlight slanting through the blinds, the city outside still waking up. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, the shuffle of aides in the hallway, but inside her office, time seemed to slow. She'd been expecting something, but not this. Not a letter from Donald J. Trump himself, hand-delivered, no return address, no warning. She broke the seal with a practiced thumb, unfolded the letter, and read the first line. You have 7 days to respond. No greeting, no preamble, just a demand, as if the world still revolved around his deadlines. The rest of the letter was a challenge, couched in legalese and bravado, daring her to answer for her recent investigation into judicial ethics, campaign finance, and the tangled web of influence that had begun to unravel in Washington. He accused her of grandstanding, of undermining the nation's institutions, of waging a personal vendetta against the pillars of American justice. He called her out by name, not as a congresswoman, but as Crockett, as if stripping her of her title would strip her of her power. She read the letter twice, then a third time, searching for the threat beneath the bluster. It was there, of course, in every line. 7 days. Or what? The letter didn't say. It didn't have to. The implication was clear. Comply or face the consequences. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable, bold and looping, a flourish that seemed to dare her to ignore it. Jasmine placed the letter on her desk, smoothed the creases, and looked up at the photo of her father on the wall. He'd always told her that power was just another word for fear, that the people who shouted the loudest were often the ones most afraid. She picked up her phone, dialed her chief of staff and said, "We need to talk." Within minutes, her team was assembled, faces tense, eyes wide. She handed the letter to her aide, watched as it was passed around the table, each person reading it in silence. When it came back to her, she said, "He wants a response. He wants a show. But we're not giving him what he wants. We're giving the country what it needs." The plan came together quickly. They would not respond in private. They would not play by his rules. Instead, Jasmine would answer in public on her terms, with the whole nation watching. She would turn the spotlight back on him, on the system, on the questions that still needed answers. She would not be intimidated. She would not be silenced. The next morning, the headlines were already swirling. Trump issues ultimatum to Crockett. 7 days to respond. The showdown begins. Cable news panels speculated about what she would do, what she could do, what she dared to do. Social media erupted. Hashtags trending within hours. Hashtag 7 days, hashtag Crockett versus Trump, hashtag let her speak. The country was watching, waiting, hungry for a confrontation. Jasmine spent the first day in meetings, fielding calls from allies and adversaries alike. Some urged caution, others demanded defiance. She listened, nodded, took notes, but her mind was already made up. She would not answer with anger. She would answer with facts. She would not stoop to insults. She would rise above them. She would not let the story be about her. She would make it about the truth. On the second day, she met with her legal team, reviewing every word, every document, every piece of evidence she had gathered over the past year. They pored over transcripts, financial records, emails, and memos, building a case not just against the former president, but against the culture of secrecy and impunity that had allowed corruption to flourish. They worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and conviction, determined to get. By the third day, the pressure was mounting. Reporters camped outside her office, cameras trained on every window, every door. Protesters gathered on the steps of the Capitol, some waving signs of support, others demanding her resignation. The air was thick with tension, the sense that something historic was about to happen. Jasmine felt it too, a knot in her stomach, a fire in her chest. She was not afraid, but she was aware of the stakes. On the fourth day, she wrote her reply. She drafted it by hand, crossing out words, rewriting sentences, searching for the perfect balance of strength and grace. She wanted every word to matter, every sentence to land. She wanted the country to see not just a politician, but a person, a daughter, a lawyer, a public servant standing up for what was right. On the fifth day, she rehearsed her statement, reading it aloud to her team, to her friends, to the empty chairs in her office. She imagined the millions who would be watching, the skeptics, the supporters, the undecided. She imagined her father, listening from somewhere beyond the noise, nodding in approval. On the sixth day, she slept. She turned off her phone, closed her laptop, and let herself rest. She knew what was coming. She knew she would need every ounce of strength. On the seventh day, she stood before the cameras, the letter in one hand, her reply in the other. The nation held its breath. The press conference was scheduled for noon, but by 10 o'clock, the rotunda outside Jasmine Crockett's office was already packed. Reporters jostled for position, microphones and cameras forming a wall of expectation. Staffers whispered in corners, glancing nervously at their phones. The air was electric, charged with the anticipation of a moment that felt bigger than politics, bigger than any one person. It was the kind of day that would be replayed in highlight reels, dissected in classrooms, remembered in family living rooms for years to come. Jasmine stood behind the closed door of her office. Her team gathered around her in a tight circle. She wore a navy suit, crisp and unadorned, her hair pulled back, her expression calm but resolute. She held the letter from Trump in her left hand, her own reply in her right. She looked at each member of her team, saw the worry in their eyes, the hope, the pride. She nodded once, a silent promise that she would carry their trust with her. When the clock struck noon, she stepped into the hallway. The crowd parted, the cameras clicked, and for a moment, all the noise faded. She walked to the podium, placed both letters on the stand, and looked out at the sea of faces. She didn't clear her throat, didn't fidget, didn't hesitate. She began to speak. 7 days ago, I received a letter from former President Donald J. Trump. In it, he demanded that I respond to his accusations, his threats, his attempt to silence the questions that millions of Americans are asking. Today, I am here to answer, not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been told to sit down, to be quiet, to stop asking why. Her voice was steady, her words measured. She didn't raise her voice, didn't let anger seep in. Instead, she spoke with the quiet authority of someone who knows the truth is on her side. She read aloud the first line of Trump's letter, then paused, letting the words hang in the air. You have 7 days to respond. She looked up, met the eyes of the reporters, the staffers, the onlookers who had gathered in the hallways and on the steps outside. I have spent my life believing that democracy is not a performance, but a promise. That the law is not a weapon, but a shield. That power is not a right, but a responsibility. I have spent my career fighting for transparency, for accountability, for the idea that no one, no matter how wealthy, how powerful, how loud, is above the law. She turned the page, her reply written in her own hand, the ink still fresh. So here is my answer. I will not be intimidated. I will not be silenced. I will not stop asking the questions that need to be asked, not for myself, but for the people who sent me here, for the people who believe that justice is not just a word, but a way of life. The cameras flashed, the microphones inched closer. She continued, her voice unwavering. You asked for a response, Mr. Trump. Here it is. I will continue my investigation. I will continue to demand answers about judicial ethics, about campaign finance, about the influence of money and power in our courts. I will continue to fight for the truth, no matter how inconvenient it may be for those who have grown comfortable in the shadows." She paused, letting the words settle. The room was silent, the tension palpable. She looked down at the letter from Trump, then back at her own reply. "You gave me 7 days. I give you this. I will not stop. Not in 7 days, not in 70, not ever. Because the American people deserve better. They deserve honesty. They deserve courage. They deserve leaders who answer to them, not to fear." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a sense that something real was happening, something unscripted and unspun. Jasmine closed her reply, placed it on top of Trump's letter, and stepped back from the podium. For a moment, no one moved. Then the questions began, shouted from every corner of the room. "Congresswoman, are you afraid of retaliation? Do you believe the former president is trying to intimidate you? What will you do if he escalates?" Jasmine raised a hand, silencing the room. "I am not afraid. I am prepared. I have faith in the law, in the Constitution, in the people who sent me here. I know that the path forward will not be easy. I know that there will be threats, there will be attacks, there will be attempts to distract and divide. But I also know that the only way to change the system is to." She stepped down from the podium, her team closing in around her. The cameras followed her every move, the questions still flying, but she didn't look back. She walked through the crowd, through the marble halls of the Capitol, out into the sunlight. The city was alive, the world was watching, and Jasmine Crockett was ready. By the end of the day, her reply was everywhere. News outlets ran the footage on a loop. Analysts debated her words. Supporters flooded social media with messages of encouragement. The hashtag Crockett reply trended for hours, joined by hashtag 7days and hashtag Stand with Jasmine. Even her critics had to admit she had not flinched. But as the sun set over Washington, Jasmine knew the real work was just beginning. The letter had been a spark, but the fire it ignited would need tending. She returned to her office, closed the door, and sat in the quiet. She thought about the days ahead, about the battles still to come, about the people counting on her to keep going. She picked up her pen, opened her notebook, and began to write. Not a speech, not a statement, but a plan. A roadmap for the next 7 days, and the 7 after that, and the 7 after that. Because the fight for justice is never finished. It is a promise renewed, every day, by those who refuse to be silent. The next morning, the city awoke to a new reality. Jasmine's reply had not only made headlines, it had shifted the conversation. On talk radio, callers debated her courage. On cable news, panels dissected her every phrase. In coffee shops and classrooms, people argued about what it meant for a sitting member of Congress to stand so publicly against a former president's ultimatum. The story was no longer just about Trump's letter. It was about what it meant to answer power with principle, to meet intimidation with transparency. The interview went viral. Clips circulated online, spliced with footage of her press conference, her reply to Trump, her quiet moments reading letters from supporters. The narrative was shifting. Jasmine was no longer just a target. She was a symbol of resistance, of hope, of the idea that one voice could still make a difference. But with the attention came new threats. Anonymous calls, veiled warnings, rumors of investigations. Her staff grew more vigilant, screening visitors, monitoring social media for signs of coordinated attacks. Jasmine refused extra security, insisting that she would not be driven into hiding. "If I start living in fear," she told her chief of staff, "then they've already won." On the third day, a new development broke. A leaked memo from a senior advisor in Trump's circle revealed that the letter to Jasmine had been part of a broader strategy, a test case designed to see how far they could push, how much they could intimidate, how quickly they could silence dissent. The memo was blunt. If Crockett folds, others will follow. If she stands, we escalate. The revelation only strengthened Jasmine's resolve. She called a meeting with her closest allies in Congress, laying out the facts. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about all of us. If we let this go unchallenged, if we let threats dictate our actions, then we're no better than the people who abuse their power." Her colleagues listened, some nodding, others silent. The room was tense, the stakes clear. One senior member, a veteran of many political battles, spoke up. "You know this could get ugly, Jasmine. They're not going to back down." Jasmine met his gaze. "Neither am I." That night, she went home to her small apartment, the city lights flickering outside her window. She sat at her kitchen table, the letter from Trump and her reply side by side. She thought about her father, about the lessons he'd taught her, about the long line of people who had come before her, people. She finished the letter, folded it, and placed it in her desk drawer. She knew the days ahead would be hard. She knew the attacks would come. But she also knew that she was not alone. The country was watching. The world was watching. And Jasmine Crockett was ready to keep going. The fourth day dawned with a gray sky over Washington, the kind of morning that seemed to press down on the city, making every step feel heavier. Jasmine Crockett arrived at her office before sunrise, her mind already racing through the day's agenda. She knew the news cycle would be relentless, that every word she spoke would be parsed and replayed, that every move she made would be scrutinized for weakness or contradiction. But she also knew that the only way forward was through. Her staff greeted her with tired smiles, the fatigue of the past week etched into their faces. They had been working non-stop, fielding calls, drafting responses, coordinating with allies and supporters. Jasmine thanked each of them, her gratitude genuine. She knew she couldn't do this alone. She never pretended otherwise. As the morning unfolded, a new headline began to circulate. "Trump allies plan counteroffensive." The article detailed a series of planned attacks, media appearances, op-eds, even a rally scheduled for the weekend. The message was clear. They would not let Jasmine's defiance go unanswered. They would fight back, and they would fight dirty. Jasmine read the article, then set it aside. She called her communications director into her office. "We're not going to respond to every attack," she said. "We're not going to get dragged into the mud. We're going to stay focused on the issues. We're going to keep telling the truth." Her director nodded, but Jasmine could see the worry in her eyes. "They're going to come after you, Jasmine. Personally. They're going to try to make this about you, not about the investigation." Jasmine smiled, a small, tired smile. "Let them try. I know who I am. I know why I'm here." The day was a blur of meetings and interviews. Jasmine appeared on a panel with other lawmakers, discussing the importance of judicial oversight and the dangers of unchecked power. She spoke with clarity and conviction, refusing to be baited by loaded questions or partisan attacks. She reminded viewers that the fight was not about personalities, but about principles. She spoke of the need for transparency, for accountability, for a government that served the people, not itself. In the afternoon, she met with a group of law students from Howard University. They had come to Washington for a seminar on constitutional law, but all they wanted to talk about was her reply to Trump. They asked her how she found the courage to stand up, how she dealt with the pressure, how she stayed true to her values in the face of so much opposition. Jasmine listened to their questions, then answered honestly. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," she said. "It's the decision that something else is more important. I'm afraid sometimes. I worry about what might happen. But I also know that if I let fear decide for me, then I'm not really free. None of us are." The students nodded, some taking notes, others just listening, their eyes wide with admiration. Jasmine saw herself in them, young, idealistic, hungry for justice. She hoped they would remember this moment, that it would give them strength when their own tests came. As the sun set, Jasmine returned to her office, exhausted but resolute. She sat at her desk, the city lights twinkling outside her window, and reflected on the day. She thought about the attacks, the threats, the endless stream of criticism. She thought about the support, the letters, the students who had looked to her for guidance. She thought about the promise she had made, to herself, to her father, to the people who believed in her. She opened her laptop and began to draft a new statement. This one was not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but for the record. She wanted to make it clear, in her own words, why she was fighting, what was at stake, what she hoped to achieve. She wrote about the importance of oversight, about the dangers of unchecked power, about the need for leaders who were willing to stand up, even when it was hard. She wrote about the people who had written to her, about the hope and fear in their words, about the trust they had placed in her. She wrote about the students she had met, about their questions, their dreams, their determination. She wrote about her father, about the lessons he had taught her, about the legacy she hoped to leave. When she finished, she saved the document, closed her laptop, and sat in the quiet. She let herself feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of the choices she had made. She knew the days ahead would be even harder. She knew the attacks would intensify, that the pressure would mount, that the stakes would only grow higher. But she also knew that she was ready. She stood, stretched, and walked to the window. The city was quiet now, the chaos of the day giving way to the stillness of night. She looked out at the Capitol, its dome glowing in the darkness, and felt a surge of determination. She would not back down. She would not be silenced. She would keep fighting not just for herself, but for everyone who believed that justice was worth the struggle. The fifth day began with a storm. Rain lashed the windows of Jasmine's office, thunder rolling over the city like a warning. She arrived early, umbrella dripping, shoes squeaking on the marble floor. The building felt different in the rain, quieter, more introspective, as if the weather itself was urging everyone to slow down, to reflect. Jasmine welcomed the change. She needed a moment to breathe, to gather herself before the next wave. Her phone buzzed with alerts before she'd even taken off her coat. Overnight, a new video had surfaced, an attack ad, funded by a political action committee with ties to Trump's inner circle. The ad was slick, expensive, and ruthless. It spliced footage of Jasmine's press conference with ominous music, her words twisted out of context, her face cast in shadow. The message was clear. She was a threat, a radical, someone who hated America's traditions. The ad ended with a call to action. Tell Jasmine Crockett to stop her witch hunt. Tell her to respect the rule of law. Jasmine watched the video once, then again her jaw set. She felt the familiar surge of anger, the urge to fight back, to call a press conference and set the record straight. But she resisted. She remembered her promise to her team, to herself. Don't get dragged into the mud. Don't let them define the terms of the debate. Stay focused on the truth. She called her communications director. We're not responding to the ad, she said. We're not giving them the satisfaction. We're going to keep talking about the issues. We're going to keep telling our story. Her director agreed, but Jasmine could hear the tension in her voice. They're going to keep coming, Jasmine. They're not going to stop. I know, Jasmine replied, but neither are we. The day was a blur of activity. Jasmine met with her legal team, reviewing the latest developments in the investigation. New evidence had come to light, documents, emails, financial records that painted an even clearer picture of the corruption she was fighting to expose. The details were damning, the implications far-reaching. Jasmine felt a mix of satisfaction and dread. The truth was coming out, but so were the consequences. She spent the afternoon in hearings, questioning witnesses, pressing for answers. She was relentless, her questions sharp and precise. She refused to be intimidated, refused to let anyone off the hook. She knew the cameras were watching, that every word would be dissected, but she didn't care. She was there to do a job, and she was going to do it well. After the hearings, she met with a group of community leaders from her district. They had come to Washington to show their support, to remind her that she was not alone. They brought letters from constituents, stories of families struggling to make ends meet, of students fighting for a better future, of workers demanding fair treatment. Jasmine listened, took notes, promised to keep fighting for them. One woman, a retired teacher, took her hand and squeezed it. "Don't let them scare you, Jasmine. We need you. My grandchildren need you." Jasmine smiled, her resolve strengthened. "I won't let you down," she promised. As evening fell, the rain finally stopped. Jasmine walked outside, the air fresh and cool, the city washed clean. She took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. She thought about the attack ad, about the threats, about the endless stream of criticism. She thought about the people who had come to see her, about their stories, their hopes, their fears. She realized that this was what mattered. Not the headlines, not the attacks, not the noise. The people. The reason she had run for office in the first place. The reason she kept fighting even when it would ache. Before bed, Jasmine stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. She thought about the days ahead, about the battles still to come. She knew the fight was far from over. She knew the attacks would keep coming. But she also knew that she was ready. She was not alone. She was part of something bigger, a movement, a moment, a promise that justice was worth fighting for. The sixth day arrived with a sense of anticipation that was almost physical. Jasmine woke before dawn, her mind already racing with the day's possibilities and perils. She brewed a pot of coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and reviewed her notes. The city outside was still dark, the streets empty except for the occasional headlights of a taxi or the distant rumble of a delivery truck. She relished the quiet, the rare moment of solitude before the world demanded her attention. By the time she arrived at her office, the building was already buzzing. Her staff had gathered early, reviewing the latest news, preparing for another day in the spotlight. Jasmine greeted them with a smile, her energy contagious. She could feel the momentum building, the sense that something important was about to happen. The morning's headlines were relentless. Crockett holds firm as Trump allies escalate. 7 days, 7 battles. The showdown continues. Pundits speculated about her next move, about Trump's possible response, about the broader implications for the country. The story had become a national obsession, a symbol of the larger struggle between truth and power, between accountability and impunity. Jasmine's first meeting of the day was with a bipartisan group of lawmakers. They had requested the meeting, eager to show their support, to discuss ways to strengthen oversight and protect whistleblowers. Jasmine welcomed the opportunity. She knew that real change required allies, that the fight for justice was bigger than any one person or party. The meeting was productive, the conversation candid and constructive. The conversation was frank, the questions probing. Jasmine answered each one thoughtfully, refusing to dodge or deflect. She spoke about the challenges of holding power to account, about the importance of a free and independent press, about the need for citizens to stay informed and engaged. As the day wore on, the pressure mounted. Rumors swirled of new attacks, of fresh attempts to discredit her work. Jasmine's staff grew anxious, their nerves frayed by the constant barrage. But Jasmine remained calm, her resolve unshaken. She knew that the only way to win was to keep moving forward, to keep telling the truth, to keep fighting for what was right. That evening, Jasmine attended a town hall meeting in her district. The room was packed, the energy electric. Constituents lined up to ask questions, to share their stories, to offer their support. Jasmine listened to each one, her empathy genuine, her gratitude deep. One young man, a recent college graduate, stood up and asked, "How do you keep going when it feels like the whole world is against you?" Jasmine smiled, her answer simple but profound. "I remember why I started. I remember who I'm fighting for. And I remember that change never comes easy. But it always comes when enough people refuse to give up." The crowd erupted in applause, the moment captured on dozens of phones, shared across social media within minutes. Jasmine felt a surge of hope, a reminder that she was not alone, that the fight was bigger than any one person. As the night drew to a close, Jasmine returned home, exhausted but fulfilled. She sat by her window, looking out at the city lights, and allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought about the journey of the past 6 days, about the challenges she had faced, about the victories and the setbacks. She knew the final day would be the hardest, but she also knew that she was ready. The 7th day began with a sunrise that painted the city in gold and rose, as if the world itself was whole. She paused, letting the words settle. The room was silent, the tension palpable. 7 days ago, I was given an ultimatum. I was told to respond, to explain myself, to justify my work. But the truth is, I don't owe anyone an explanation for doing my job. I don't owe anyone an apology for asking questions, for demanding accountability, for standing up for the people who sent me here. She picked up Trump's letter, held it up for the cameras. This letter is not just a piece of paper. It's a symbol of everything that's wrong with our politics, the threats, the intimidation, the belief that power is a shield against scrutiny. But power is not a shield. It is a responsibility. And I intend to honor that responsibility, no matter the cost. She set the letter down, picked up her own reply. This is my answer, not just to the former president, but to everyone who believes that justice is worth fighting for. I will not be silenced. I will not be intimidated. I will not stop asking questions, not for myself, but for the country I love. She spoke of the investigation, of the evidence her team had uncovered, of the need for transparency and reform. She spoke of the people who had written to her, of the students and teachers and workers who had shared their stories. She spoke of the future, of the kind of country she wanted to leave for the next generation. I know this fight is not easy. I know the attacks will keep coming. But I also know that we are stronger than our fear, braver than our doubts, better than our worst instincts. I believe in this country. I believe in its people. And I believe that together, we can build something better. The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing off the marble walls. Jasmine stood tall, her eyes shining with determination. She answered a few questions, her voice steady, her answers clear. She refused to be baited, refused to be drawn into a war of words. She stayed focused on the issues, on the truth, on the promise she had made. That afternoon, Jasmine met with a coalition of advocacy groups, civil rights leaders, legal scholars, grassroots organizers. They discussed ways to channel the energy of the moment into lasting reform. New legislation for judicial transparency, protections for whistleblowers, campaign finance reform. Jasmine listened, took notes, offered her support. She knew that real change would take time, that the fight would be long and hard. But she also knew that the window was open, that the country was paying attention. As the meeting ended, an organizer pulled Jasmine aside. "You know they're going to come after you even harder now," she said quietly. "They always do when you get this close." Jasmine nodded. "I know, but I also know I'm not alone. That's what scares them." That evening, Jasmine appeared on a national news program. The host, known for his sharp wit and skepticism, tried to corner her with tough questions. "Congresswoman, Some say you're just grandstanding, that this is all about publicity. How do you respond? Jasmine didn't flinch. If standing up for the truth is grandstanding, then I'll wear that label with pride. But this isn't about me. It's about the people who sent me here. It's about the future of our democracy. And I'd rather be accused of caring too much than of not caring at all. The interview went viral, clips shared across platforms, dissected by pundits and ordinary people alike. The consensus was clear. Jasmine Crockett was not backing down. Late that night, as the city quieted, Jasmine sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of letters and notes. She picked up a pen and began to write thank you cards, her handwriting looping across the page. She wrote to the nurse in Detroit, the teacher in Phoenix, the veteran in North Carolina. She wrote to the high school student who said she wanted to be like Jasmine when she grew up. She wrote to the grandmother who said she finally felt seen. She wrote until her hand cramped, until her eyes blurred wit. She realized that the real power of her reply was not in the words themselves, but in what they had inspired. It was in the conversations that were happening in living rooms and classrooms, in the questions being asked by people who had once felt powerless. It was in the sense of possibility that now hung in the air, fragile but real. Jasmine knew that the fight for justice was never finished. It was a promise renewed every day, by every person who refused to be silent. She was ready to keep going, to keep asking the questions, to keep standing up, even when it was hard, even when she was afraid. The following Monday, Jasmine Crockett stood at her office window, watching the city come alive. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the Capitol lawn. She felt the familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach, but also a deep, steady calm. The storm of the past week had not broken her. If anything, it had clarified her purpose. Her phone buzzed with a new alert. A major newspaper had published an editorial titled, "The Power of One Voice." The piece praised Jasmine's courage, but more importantly, it called on other lawmakers to follow her example. Accountability is not a partisan issue, the editorial read. It is the foundation of democracy. Jasmine smiled, grateful for the support. But she knew that words on a page were only the beginning. Real change required action. She spent the morning in meetings, working with her team to draft new legislation aimed at increasing judicial transparency and protecting whistleblowers. The process was slow, every sentence debated, every clause scrutinized. But Jasmine was patient. She knew that the details mattered, that the work done in quiet rooms could shape the future in ways that headlines never could. At noon, she met with a group of young interns who had come to Washington for the summer. They were eager, idealistic, full of questions. Jasmine listened to their hopes and fears, their dreams for the country.